Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work as a school-based counselor at a school in Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Canaan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good afternoon, friends. There are three things I want to cover with you on today's podcast. I'm going to share one of the main trends that was emphasized at the NACAC conference. I'm going to return to an exercise I shared with you about a month ago, but I've tweaked it a bit. And I want to ask for your input. And we're going to have part 4 or 5 of Aaron Wolf's interview that explains why when a student gets admitted to 4, 6, 8 schools, you pick the number. The aid awards are all over the place, the financial aid awards. And Erin will cover reasons 13 through 18 today. And her final segment next week will just cover a range of different topics related to money and paying for college. But let's dive in and talk about one of the big takeaways from the conference. Now, if you're a regular listener, you remember when I came back from NACAC 2022 in Houston, and I talked about how stunned I was that Angel Perez, president of NACAC, said in 10 years he could see direct admissions growing to the point where it was the number one way colleges admit students. Well, direct admissions has taken off so much in the 2 years since then that I'm starting to think he is right. Now, right now, it's mostly in open enrollment schools and moderately selective schools, but it's inevitably going to change to more selective schools, and eventually, I'm not saying the most selective schools, but I just think it's going to keep moving up that selectivity meter, and more selective schools are going to sign up for direct admissions for a lot of reasons. So one of the themes of the conference was the growth of direct admissions and the different versions of direct admissions. Now, if you haven't heard a past podcast, let me start with a brief definition. So back when I was at KIPP, the Knowledge is Power program, as director of college counseling there, I helped College Greenlight work on bringing direct admissions to Atlanta back in 2020 and 2021. And at the time, they were calling it direct admissions, flipped admissions, which is actually a great name. Because with direct admissions, instead of students applying to schools, the student completes some basic information on things like activities, biographical information, depending on the version, an essay or two. It goes into a portal, with test scores or not test scores. They're all a little different. And colleges who are direct admission members with that particular group that's offering it access the portal, and they can go in and admit the students they want. So there's no specific applications to specific colleges. There's no app fees. Okay. There's no denials. There's no rejections. There's less work. There's a much quicker response time, speedier response, and scholarship dollars are allocated. So that's the basic concept. But it's a little like the Wild Wild West out there because there's so many different versions and so many things are changing. They're changing fast in this space. So the conference talked about that. I went to multiple sessions. And I also talked with many people just outside the sessions. There's a huge display at NACAC, and there's a lot of people who go around and they're working their tables like vendors, and you can talk to them about these things. So let me just give you one example. So that same EAB I referred to a second ago that purchased CapEx and College Greenlight, they were intentionally targeting first-gen, low-income, and students of color with their direct admissions, flipped admissions. Now, fast forward to now, just to see the changes. EAB, which took over CapEx 4 years ago, has renamed that CapEx side Appley. Now, I didn't know until the conference, probably because I just don't get things. You guys don't know this, but everybody will crack a joke and everybody gets them on me. So anyway, Appley is a playoff of happily. So I never knew that until the conference. But students using Appley can learn about colleges and scholarships, take virtual tours, get resources for college exploration process, and get matched. Now, they want to come on the podcast, so you'll probably be hearing from them and talk about their resources. But direct admissions is now under Appley, but that's not the only major change. They are no longer targeting this process to just first-gen, low-income, or students of color. Appley's direct admissions now is targeted at all students. Like I'm saying, there's so much change in this space. Then Niche, they have greatly expanded their direct admission offerings. They now have over 100 partners. And they're not targeting low-income, first-gen, students of color. They're open to anybody. All right. Third player in the game, Common App, and they're going all in. Huge focus of Common App. They went from 70 members to 116 in 1 year signed up for their direct admissions program. That's almost a 70% increase in 1 year. They also have colleges from 34 states. Okay, so you're thinking, I've got a handle on this. Stuck, it's Appley, Niche, and Common App. That doesn't sound that hard. Well, that's just the start. College boards now jumping into the direct admissions game. As of the end of 2023, they're launching their own version. And they're being very vocal about it. Now, I'm not able to make the College Board Conference this year. It's in Austin, Texas. I was talking with a senior leader there. Mark, we still have space. We still have space. I'm not going down there. It's the end of October. Too many students are too busy with writing. Last time I went, I was like up at 1 a.m. and passed it off work to members of our team. But the point is, I know if I went there, they would be all about this. Because when you go to College Board Conference, it's great because all the VP of enrollment, senior level people are all there in one place. But I'm telling you, get ready to hear nonstop College Board products, right? SAT, CLEP, AP exams. They usually break the new APs and give all the research on that, which is somewhat interesting. CSS profile, and now they're direct admissions. I guarantee there's going to be session after session because they're promoting it. So you think, okay, I think I have a handle on the space. You're telling me Appley's a player, formerly EAB, formerly College Greenlight, and CapEx. I think I got a handle on that. You're telling me Common App's a player. You're telling me Niche is a player. Now you're telling me College Board's getting in the game. Well, that's not all there is because there's the states. There's the state version plans. Now, this isn't completely new because Idaho and South Dakota actually were the first states to have direct admissions. Both Idaho and South Dakota launched direct admission for their state in 2015, but with very, very little fanfare and very few people applied to it. I haven't even talked about it one time on this podcast. All right. And we started prepping for this podcast September of 17, our first episode at the start of 2018. Because it didn't really catch fire, these state plans, until Common App got really behind it in 2022. And ever since then, off to the races. And everybody's all in now. Niche, Common App, Appley, College Board, and promoting it heavily. So you think, well, 2 states, still fairly manageable. It's not only 2 states. Every time I turn around, it seems like another state is adding their own direct admission plan. Georgia has direct admission now for everybody except the 3 most selective public schools, UGA, Georgia Tech, and Georgia College and State. Wisconsin has a direct admission plan. Once again, doesn't apply to Madison, Eau Claire, or La Crosse, but they have a direct admission plan. And check this out. There are over 50 Minnesota colleges and universities participating in their direct admissions program. That includes the full range of community, technical, tribal, private, and public institutions. So keep an eye on this space because innovation is more prevalent here than in Silicon Valley. And I just got back from Silicon Valley and was that ever entrepreneurial? All kinds of ideas were brimming there. It was great intellectual fusion of energy. But there's also massive confusion because there's all kinds of different versions, who your target is, what do students have to put in the portal, which colleges are partner and member schools, what's the timeline? Like there's a lot of different factors. So it's a little confusing to learn all these different systems. But I continue to remain bullish about this. There's a lot of exhilaration. And I want to share an email we got in late September. Now, I'm just going to read an email on here without permission. I asked the listener if I could share it, and they enthusiastically said yes. But I want you to see some of the excitement that's here in this direct admission space. So here's the email. Hello, Mark. OMG. I have to share this with you. I love the podcast. I've written in the past to you, and I've heard so much, and I've learned so much that I now have a scholar match student. Thanks to you guys. He is an amazing low-income, high-achieving, first-gen Hispanic student with a 3.9 GPA from New Jersey. Then the listener says this, direct admission is amazing, ! We tried Greenlight Concourse EAB. Now he would have to say Greenlight Concourse EAB Appley. Then he says, meh, 3 offers. Niche, much better, 11 offers. Common App, holy smokes, 49 offers just today. So great, ! You and I both know he'll get into colleges, but it's really going to be about the programs he's looking for and the financials that will truly matter. But holy smokes, does 49 offers give him a confidence boost? So there's so many things tearing down our kids' confidence. It's nice to have that positive infusion of energy. And this isn't the only person. I've had other families I'm working with write to tell me how many admission offers they got this year because they used one of the direct admission pathways. So he goes on to say, anyway, I just had to share this as I know you are loving direct admissions, and so am I. Hope California is treating you well. So I don't want to say the person's name just to protect their confidentiality, but thank you so much for that. So I want to transition to our next theme. And some of you will be like, didn't you just talk about this? I did talk about it, but there's some changes. So about a month ago, I talked about going through all the main different factors that determine what is a priority for each person in selecting a college and ranking them, 1 to 26. So you're like, why are you back again with it? Because I've had 2 different things I feel should be on this list based on how important they are to people. And then on top of that, a listener sent in another one. And at first I was like, nah, I'm not sure. But I think it was just that reflexive pride. Because I'm like, I think I might have already categorized that by another one. But then the more I thought about it, the listener was absolutely right. So I'm going to share these 3. But that leaves us at 29. And I'm going to ask you, if I could miss one, I'd probably miss another one. So you can make suggestions and maybe we can get us to a round number of 30. Now, let's say you think, you should have major international airport. Are you close to major international airport? I'm not going to do one just for that because we could have 100 and then this exercise would be impossible. We already have things like areas around the college and, campus setting. If you're in a large city, it's going to be a major international airport. So I feel like, some of them you can't be so precise to nail everything. All right, I'm going to go through in case you missed that episode, or even if you did hear it, I want to introduce the 3 new ones. These are, from my experience, 29 things that for some people are major factors in the colleges that they like. And the exercise is to rank them. I've been doing it myself, and it is hard. In fact, the only way I can actually do it is let's say I'm comparing up 2 things that maybe are important to me. Okay, let's just say one is weather and one is class size. The only way I can do it is I have to say to myself, okay, all things being equal, you have to pick one college. One's going to give you the weather you want, and one's going to give you the class size you want. Which one would you pick? That's the only way that I'm personally able to do it. But the idea is you rank them from 1 to 29, and what it does is it make you think through the process. Now, as my students have been doing this, my parents have been doing this, it's been really leading to some great insights for me and to them, and them thinking through the process. I also had a parent tell me, please don't ask me to do one list with my husband because it's going to take us at least 2 days to do this. So, I learned, and now I'm asking each parent to do it separately, and then they can talk through it. But it really is really hard to do together, let alone by yourself. So what are the 29? Number 1, these are alphabetized, okay? Number 1, the area surrounding the college. That's a very big factor for a lot of people, all right? Next, campus beauty. And some of these are self-explanatory. I'm not going to go into depth. I think they're clear to you. Okay, campus beauty. And then the next I'm adding is campus feel. That's a new one because so many people want that campus feel, that protected campus, that set apart, distinct campus that you can tell you're on a campus. It's not like you're intertwined with the city. That's a major factor for a lot of people. And so I felt like it warranted its own category. So that's one of the new ones. And then we have campus setting, which really is large city, small city, suburban, college town, or more remote or rural. Then we have career outcomes. Okay. Then we have class size. We have college rankings. We have cost affordability. We have distance from home. We have diversity. And that's how you define diversity. For some people, that's geographic. For some, it's, ideological. It's different types of kids. For some, it's racial, ethnic, socioeconomic. I mean, there's a lot of types of diversity. So that's kind of beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And it's intentionally meant to be broad so you can have it apply, not narrowcast it too much. Then we have experiential learning, co-ops, internships, study abroad, research, learning by doing. Then we have facilities. And then this is the other one that I wanted to add. And I'm like, stuck, you fool. How could you forget this? Financial resources and financial wealth of the college. We've had so many people ask us, how can I tell if a college is financially sound? And I never really had anything about the financial soundness of the college. Duh. So I wanted to come back in and add that. Next, we have food quality, then friendliness, then graduation and retention rates. And then here's the other one that a listener sent in. Housing options. Duh. How did I forget housing options? My pride got in the way. First, I responded back. I'm like, well, I already put residential versus commuter, but that's not the same as housing options. When I thought about it, I'm like, we absolutely need housing options. How many people talk about how important the dorms are, in the living situation? Now, we can't get so precise. Like some people are like, well, can I get off-campus housing? Is it affordable? Well, that's just going to have to go under affordability or life around the campus. You can't just create a category for everything. You'll have 100 things. It's already hard enough to do this. 17, name recognition. So for some people, name recognition is not necessarily the same as prestige or rankings because it can be very important to people that people have heard of their college, even if it's really not that hard to get in. So that's why I have a category just for that. And then 18 can be very important. Nature, green spaces. That's a really big deal to a lot of people. 19, overall academic excellence. So a lot of people, it's not about your major. It's about the overall academic excellence. A lot of people will say, well, what if you change your major? So overall academic excellence. And then 20, political climate. And then 21 is religious affiliation and or religious culture. Then we have residential versus commuter students. Okay. Safety, school size, sports, school spirit, strength in my major, student support, weather. All right. So I'm sharing with you this for three things. One, because I've added 3 new categories, right? The more the protected campus, the campus feel, housing options, and financial strength of the college. But I'm like, if I can miss 1 or 2 before, I can maybe miss another one I'm not thinking of. So I'm also using crowdsourcing. So you send in if you think there's something that we didn't think of, and we can have a round number of 30, and we can all do this together. Take advantage of all of our knowledge. And for those of you who are driving and all this will be in the show notes, so you don't have to memorize it or go back and play it again. I'll put the list in the show notes, okay? All right, friends. It's time for the last part of my interview. And the interview is with Aaron Wolf. And Aaron is the Director of Financial Aid at Bucknell. And we're doing the final 13 to 18 reasons of why aid offers are all over the place. She's back next week to talk about a range of other financial topics. But we're rounding out that 1 through 18 here. And take notes, and you'll be more knowledgeable than any counselor other than financial aid people if you master these 18 reasons. So I know we really got in the weeds on this series. Hopefully we didn't get too weedsy. Hopefully you enjoy it. All right, listen, enjoy the final part of the 18 reasons with Aaron Wolf.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Okay, friends, we're going to handle reasons 13 all the way through 18 in part 4. I start out by asking Aaron, reason 13, preferential packaging. I ask Aaron to define preferential packaging and to explain how it impacts aid awards. I ask Aaron about reason 14. Some schools give merit money and others don't. And I ask Aaron to comment on this. I ask Aaron about reason 15. Some colleges match competitor awards and others don't. I asked Aaron about reason 16, how some colleges address the cost of living of the area. What admission professionals called higher cost areas that you're coming from, and some don't. I asked Aaron about reason 17, how some colleges take K-12 tuition from a sibling at a private school into consideration when assessing what a family can pay and others don't. Finally, I asked Aaron about reason 18, how some colleges categorize untaxed income compared to how other schools classify untaxed income. Aaron defines what untaxed income is, and she gives us several examples of untaxed income as part of what they see as fairness. Listen and enjoy. Aaron, let's talk about the next reason, reason 13. Some schools use preferential packaging and some don't. And can you please explain to our listeners what preferential packaging is?
Really great question regarding preferential packaging. Preferential packaging is the practice of changing the type and the amount of the financial aid awarded to a student based on the desirability of the student relative to the applicant pool. Most colleges really only have a finite amount of financial aid available. So you can find that schools may decide when looking at students and their pool that their discretion over how much of their own money they choose to award to the student may be awarded in the form of a bigger grant to a student who they would really like to enroll. In some cases, the total of a grant from the college and the loans to the student is entitled, may actually exceed the student's financial need. And really, that's going to be based on possibly enrollment goals for certain majors, maybe even strategic initiatives of the institution. So you may find that students at the top of the applicant pool may receive merit scholarships designed to reward their outstanding high school record and further entice them to the college.
Yeah, I think I forgot, which that one is almost as obvious as the initial one I led with, which some schools cost more, which is some schools give merit and some schools don't, right? And some schools give large merit and some give small merit and some give it as a high percentage of their awards. And so it's going to completely be apples and oranges if you're comparing 8 awards for a merit award versus a need award. And I'm sure that's probably a lot of the appeals that you get where people are, comparing merit to need and need to merit. Is that something that you just encounter on a regular basis? I would think so if I worked in financial.
100% across the board. Yeah. Those are the main drivers for a lot of appeals as families are navigating the process. Not every school provides merit across the board. They might only give maybe 10% of their population merit scholarships. So, many schools that are working with institutional dollars may just be using the need-based portion and only have very few dollars through merit. So it depends on that breakdown in their budget. But then also, at the end of the day, families will definitely be, sending us SAT scores or GPAs and latest transcripts to show why their students should be eligible for scholarships. Going back to just the overall process, most merit scholarships are typically decided by admissions. So we may hear it and see it in financial aid, but we may not have been on the side to make those decisions. So we take the information and we share it with our partners for sure. But, for most of us, we're dealing with the need-based dollars at that point.
Here's one within merit. Some schools respond to competitor awards when it comes to appeals, right? Like there are schools that literally even put it on their websites that say, we will match an award from these schools that they deem to be peer institutions. They generally will not do it for a school that like public and private is apples and oranges and a less selective school compared to a more selective school. But some schools match competitor awards. Some are very upfront about it, and some of them, they don't really advertise it, but they'll do that. And so that's another thing I've seen come into play. Would you say that that's something you've seen pretty frequently?
Absolutely. Families are very happy to provide a copy of the competitive award offer. That is for certain. And then, it would be up to our certainly financial aid offices to decide if we're going to entertain those or not, and the policies of the school. Because again, we might be assessing the financial strength of the family slightly different than school A, B, and C are doing. So, that's when we might say, okay, let's talk about your aid application since you received. Did you tell this school something that maybe you didn't relay to us? And if that's the case, then we can walk down the path of maybe looking at professional judgment reviews and all of that to, again, assess kind of the need-based side. Some schools may receive those competitive awards and just say thank you for the information, but our word is firm. And it will depend on the policies of the schools and their capability of addressing the concerns of the family. Certainly, we absolutely will talk to our families, and any financial aid officer will tell you that. We certainly are here to assist, but there may be, a point in which we can't match things across the board.
So here's one, Erin, and this would be strictly for profile schools, higher cost areas, right? So a student is coming from the Bay Area or Manhattan, very different than if they're coming from maybe Kentucky or a place, Kansas, a place with a much lower cost structure. Can you talk about how schools that use the profile have the ability to take higher cost areas into consideration, but some do and some don't, or some do it with different multiples? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a conversation point that I've heard colleagues address, as they're looking at their formulas and how to determine financial aid. I will say that it's not been something that we have actually done, since I've been in financial aid. I don't know many colleagues who are using that, but they may not be telling me that as well, because, but schools can choose to change kind of the multipliers that, if you want to talk about the calculation for financial aid, it's pages and pages and pages long. So there's the federal pages of, one time a parent asked, how do you even determine this? I'm like, well, there's a hand calculation that you could do. And they're like, oh, well, sure, send it my way. And then they're like, oh, okay, this is like 30 pages long. Not that long. But, on the institutional side too, you can, certainly factors by which states, certainly some schools may look at the percent or the amount that a family might be paying in home property taxes versus, another location. Again, completely school specific in their methodology and their choice and their philosophy on looking at that, but it's not something that I've seen too much of yet.
Well, I don't know if this is still true, but I was told from a professional in the business that you can do up to a 20% adjustment, for higher cost areas, which still doesn't even begin to account for a Manhattan or the Bay Area or Hawaii or some really expensive places.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why a lot of times families coming from those higher cost areas, don't qualify for aid, and they can't understand, how does this school think I can pay $80,000? Like, how can they possibly think that? And if the cost of their area is not factored in, it's tough to make it. But then most schools don't have unlimited resources.
Yeah, and that's, when you go back to talking about the home equity factor, because, certainly the equity of a home in California is going to be very different than it is in central Pennsylvania. That's where schools may be doing some adjustments on that, and maybe looking state specific in their philosophy and recruiting out of certain areas in the country too, to make sure the packaging is still in line, when you're looking at if income was the same, but it's this other anomaly with, where just based on where they live, that's impacting the change.
Let's talk about another one. A student has a sibling that's in an independent school, so they're paying independent K through 12 tuition. My understanding is some schools see that, that's a lifestyle choice that you choose to make. And then other schools will say, no, we believe in education, and we'll reduce your discretionary money off of that. And then even with schools that do it, there's not a standard number. Some school might say, well, do 6,500, and some might do 10, and some might do 12. That's my understanding. Is that correct, or correct me if I'm wrong on that?
You are correct. And, we would only, for FAFSA only schools, most financial aid individuals wouldn't really know you have a student at a K through 12 school that you're paying tuition for, unless you somehow wrote in a letter or provided more details to the school. But the schools like using Profile are definitely seeing that on the application. And by, probably most schools, and maybe it's not a fair statement, many schools may say that's a life choice. And thank you for sharing, but we are not adjusting our financial aid based on your decision to send your child to a school that is additional tuition. whereas others may have a request that they can put in additional documentation. So maybe they're going to ask for actual proof of the educational expense. So rather than just by what was indicated on an application, they may ask for a copy of the tuition statement from that school to see what the offset is if they qualified for any kind of aid for that program. And then, yes, they might choose to make some sort of adjustment, whether that be on the income side, and then rerun the financial aid through the institutional methodology formulas to determine if that does create any additional eligibility for institutional aid.
Let's talk about untaxed income.
Okay.
Because that's another place, right, where a school could, I guess that would be professional judgment, or that would be in your policy handbook on how you're going to handle different types of untaxed income. Why don't you explain to our listeners what untaxed income is and give a couple examples of how one school might handle untaxed income different than another school?
Sure. So untaxed income, well, this year, through the virtue of the new simplified FAFSA, many items related to untaxed income have kind of been removed. So untaxed income, for the things that I care about, number one would be child support received. That's on the FAFSA now, but it's actually an asset on the FAFSA and not considered untaxed income that the profile uses in that way. Untaxed income would be dollars that perhaps you're contributing to a 401k, 403b. So it's dollars that you are sheltering from your income and putting it into that future retirement account. So a school will collect a copy of your W-2, and now that information is excluded on the FAFSA, but on the profile side, the CSS profile, we're still looking at what are you putting into your retirement and adding that in the application if you didn't report it, to make sure that additional untaxed income you have, again, it's income you really earned, it just got moved kind of to another account, that does get counted back in. Other untaxed income could be your any kind of contribution you're making to an HSA, that high deductible healthcare account, that's on your tax return. I think the amount for the tax year 2024 is over like $8,200 or $8,300 for a joint household that has that ability. So again, if a family can shelter that much additional money into that account, a school may choose to in turn add that untaxed income back into the formula for institutional aid purposes. It could be a family who is self-employed, who has what's called the self-employed, the SEP IRA on your tax return. Some families might be contributing very large sums of money into that account, and the school may choose, again, to use that in terms of adding that back into our formulas. Also, IRAs, if you have a traditional IRA, those are something that a school may account in terms of the untaxed income. There's, it's just looking back on the federal side, a lot of those things were removed this year. So it really did shift kind of the calculation for the student aid index. But a lot of the profile schools are still using that to, again, as we think about fairness and we think about a family's financial strength, those are all resources and opportunities they had to save and put money in different accounts. So we might be using those in our calculation for institutional dollars.
And that's a big difference. I mean, I know the max SEP IRA contribution is $69,000.
Yeah.
So
I haven't seen that yet, but I think 58.
Yeah. So that's a big difference if one school is counting that $69,000, and we know the formula is income driven, and another school's not. And then you mentioned just the HSA. And it's actually even higher if someone's over 50. It's like 9,300.
Catch-up contributions.
Yeah, catch-up contributions. And those are areas that you've seen different policies from one school to the next, right? Based on how they choose to handle those things.
Absolutely. And again, when we're looking at all those factors, that's why we may be asking families for additional documentation that they might find to be a nuisance. But it's because we're trying to put everyone on the table with the same factors calculated into the formula.
Yeah, and if people are wondering, like, what's going on with all this untaxed stuff? Well, the tax return is primarily being used as the driver to show income, right? So, but if you have these things that reduce your taxable income, like IRA contributions and HSAs, then, a school's going to make a decision. Is this family that has the ability to put $69,000 in a SEP the same as this family that could never do that? And some of them may say, no, that's not this. Those two families don't have the same financial strength, and we think that should be accounted for in the award.
Right.
A couple more I've heard, they're not as big ones as that, but one is home office deduction, and another is use of company or tax, using your car as a tax write-off. I've heard some schools say, yeah, we're going to look at the profession and make the decision whether we think that was a legitimate expense versus just automatically giving you a home office tax write-off or a car tax write-off. Is that consistent with what you've seen?
Absolutely. And I will say, with families are adjusting their income by having the ability to write some of these things off. So we might look at what are those, again, what are you using your home for? Does anything look like odd with what is being reported? Depreciation is another factor that many of us may be looking at in terms of if you have rental properties and other things, or when calculating institutional methodology too, because again, we're really getting a big picture of what's happening in the household. So those are things that some school may choose to account for where others are maybe not accounting for.
So how would you do that? Like, how would you go in and determine whether you're going to use like business or real estate depreciation for rental properties? That sounds really complicated to me.
Yeah, we have full tax returns. So even though families most of our schools that are doing full verification are looking at all of the schedules that go into a tax return, and we're doing that deep dive into looking at, what's being reported. And so it will be up to the school's policy, again, on institutional methodology to see if those losses are really added back and accounted for.
Erin, is there anything we haven't talked about today that you can think of that is a reason why an aid award might vary from one school to another? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground, but I might not be.
I feel like we have covered a lot, Mark. I feel like this is really great information for our families and may lead to some of our listeners wanting to learn more about a particular area we talked about too. So, certainly if we can be of any assistance ever in unpacking any of financial aid questions, we're always happy to be assisted.
Friends, this concludes this segment of my interview with Erin Wolf. We hope you join us next week for the next segment. Friends, on Thursday's episode, Julie and I are talking about, do senior grades matter in admissions decisions? Do colleges see senior grades? You're going to want to listen to that discussion. And then our roundtable's back to talk about the rise of colleges asking for video submission. Our listeners sent in several questions on that topic, and our roundtable will tackle them. Then we have a brand new interview, not a brand new interviewee, but a brand new interview. I just interviewed Jay Rosner, but I didn't ask him that I should have asked him around anecdotally. Jay's been in the game for decades. When should somebody start preparing for the SAT, ACT? How can you prepare as a very young age? What can you do? How many hours should you study a day? How many days a week should you study? Do you go at this thing for 12 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 4 weeks? Does it depend? Like those are the kinds of things that we talk about in this interview. It's all about, if you're going to take the ACT or the SAT, what should you do to get the best score? We also talk about self-prep versus group prep versus one-on-one. But we cover a range of topics. I think you're going to like it, and it's a brand new interview that we have. And friends, remember, college is not a prize to be won. College is a match to be made. Don't let anybody else tell you what's best for you. Don't outsource to a friend, to a relative, to a ranking book, what you regard as beautiful, what you see as your best fit. You make that decision yourself. Block out the noise. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.